For most of us, looking over the Atlantic brings in focus one particular country, the United States of America. Which is understandable, they represent the most powerful and influential nation on the planet. However, this view completely distorts our reality. Both North and South America are home to numerous nations with extraordinary histories, and some of them are actual cradles of the human civilization, like Mexico for instance. Hi, welcome to 7 Facts. South of the United States lies one of the largest and most populous countries on Earth, the United Mexican States. That's the official designation, by the way. This large country is often overshadowed by its northern neighbor, but that really shouldn't be the case. After all, it's one of humanity's 6 cradles of civilization. Intrigued? Here's the story. Tens of thousands of years ago, the first human beings arrived to Mexico. I can't give you a specific year because we don't really know for sure. Evidence of human presence have been uncovered, but their age estimations range from 21 to 40,000 years old. We do know for sure that 10,000 years ago, hunter-gatherers arrived in the Valley of Mexico. They encountered a land of dense forests, a collection of lakes, and plenty of small animals and fish. Compared to conditions in other areas, life was pretty good in prehistoric Mexico. So much so that the first humans managed to do something new. They invented agriculture. By 5000 BC, people began to selectively breed corn. This enabled them to settle down, build densely populated villages, and build the foundations of Mesoamerican religions, mathematics, and societies. By the way, they later planted squash, tomatoes, common beans, and tobacco, later bringing in pineapples, cocoa, and peppers from other areas. So from a culinary point of view, we can really thank early Mexico for these delicacies. Anyway, these early cultures created their own view of the world. Different from the Abrahamic concept, Mesoamericans had a belief that everything, from the earth, the sun and the moon, to plants, animals, water and mountains, all of it is a manifestation of the supernatural. Their pantheon became vast and complex, but many deities were common among the various civilizations that arose in time. This is important. Although there were differences in chronology, geography, and particular concepts, the crucial aspects of Mesoamerican religions were shared among nations. New deities were commonly accepted in the pantheon, joining the old gods or merging with existing ones that shared similar characteristics. And this quality of Mesoamerican spirituality may have been crucial for the success of their Christianization. These early Mexican civilizations were doing quite well. So well, in fact, that they had the opportunity to invent writing. Mesoamerica was actually the only place in the Americas where the indigenous nations invented their own writing system before European colonization. Now, before we continue, you need to understand how great these achievements are. This is a region of the world with no major navigable rivers, difficult terrain, no beasts of burden, and a complete absence of herding animals. The Americas lacked the animal species the Old World had at their disposal to domesticate. No horses, no sheep, no cows. And despite this, they were building civilizations, just like the rest of the world. The very first major civilization that emerged were the Olmecs. 2,500 years ago, they created a civilization that would lay the foundations of the nations to come. Some hallmarks of Mesoamerican societies like ritualistic bloodletting or the Mesoamerican ball game were ever present in Olmec society. The Olmecs emerged around well-watered alluvial soil and built their transportation network around the Coatzacoalcos River basin, which created a highly productive society. The Nile, the Indus, the Yellow, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers created the exact same conditions to bring forth the earliest civilizations in the Old World. The Olmecs reigned for nearly 1,000 years, but by 400 BC were gone. However, by that time another culture emerged, the Mayans. They appeared on the scene from around 750 BC onward, stretching their kingdoms from the Pacific coast of southern Mexico and Guatemala to the Yucatan Peninsula. These people were not a united entity but a collection of kingdoms and related cultures. They built step pyramids, impressive artworks, and the most sophisticated and highly developed writing system in the Americas. Their collective kingdoms numbered millions of inhabitants, and their reign lasted until 1697 AD, when the last Mayan city, Neupetten, fell in the hands of the Spaniards. Mayan nations, though, exist to this day. One of the most spectacular remnants of ancient civilizations in Mexico can be found at Teotihuacan. Not far from Mexico City, Teotihuacan is the site of many of the most significant Mesoamerican pyramids. At its height, in the first half of the first millennium AD, this city was the largest in the Americas and one of the largest in the world. We don't know if this was a city-state or the center of an empire, and we don't know the ethnicity of the inhabitants. But Teotihuacan was very influential. Its culture, architecture, and spiritual views can be traced to nearly every other Mesoamerican culture. Human sacrifice was also practiced here. To invoke or appease the gods, people, mostly enemies, were decapitated, had their hearts removed, bludgeoned to death, or buried alive. By the way, ritualistic human sacrifice was a common practice among most pre-Columbian civilizations. Teotihuacan was completely abandoned by the 8th century AD, possibly by a local uprising against the ruling class. The Toltecs were another great civilization. Much of what we know comes from Aztec oral traditions, which might not be a reliable source. The Aztecs saw the Toltecs and the Teotihuacanas as their intellectual and cultural predecessors and a peak of civilization. The Toltecs were indeed great artisans and pyramid builders, and also conquerors and warriors. Their influence was immense, but their reign ended in the 12th century AD. And from the ashes of the old civilizations arose a new one, the Aztecs. The Nahua people entered central Mexico in the 6th century AD and slowly spread. While they lacked in political power, they made up for with ambition and military skill. They entered the Valley of Mexico in 1200 AD with one group, the Mexica, being the last to arrive. They built a city, Tenochtitlan, on an island of Lake Texcoco. That city would later turn into the capital of their mighty empire. At their peak, they ruled over nearly half of Mexico's populations. By the 14th century, they transformed Tenochtitlan into the largest city of the time. That city would later fall into the hand of the Spanish in 1521 and then would be turned into Ciudad de Mexico, or Mexico City. Which brings us to the next chapter, the Spanish conquest of Mexico. The first Europeans to arrive in Mexico were the survivors of a Spanish shipwreck in 1511. This was hardly of any consequence for the natives, but in 1517 an expedition led by Francisco Hernández de Córdoba left Cuba to explore the shores of Mexico. They encountered a Mayan army and were defeated, marking the Europeans' first encounter with a civilization comparable to their own. Then Hernán Cortés came, landing on April 22, 1519, a date that marks the beginning of 300 years of Spanish hegemony over Mexico. It is a common belief that the advanced weaponry of the Spaniards was what overwhelmed the Aztecs, but that is only part of the story. Yes, the Spanish had cannons, guns, crossbows, horses, and war dogs, but these were means of survival, not conquest. After all, they were absolutely and completely outnumbered. No, what really helped Cortés and the Spaniards were two things: alliances with the locals who rivaled the Aztecs, and smallpox. Thousands of natives helped the conquistadors in their quest against the Aztecs. What those natives didn't realize was that this endeavor was part of a larger plan to conquer all of the New World and bring it under the rule of the Spanish crown. On the other hand, within 6 months of the Europeans' arrival, smallpox spread in most of Mesoamerica. The natives had never encountered this disease and had no immunity to it. As a result, many millions died. The Spanish didn't orchestrate this epidemic, but it certainly helped them. By 1521, Tenochtitlan fell and the Aztec Empire was gone. While the conquest continued for decades, the fall of Tenochtitlan marked the foundation of New Spain. Colonialism was now inescapable. The Viceroyalty of New Spain was now ruling Mesoamerica. Spain's colonial empire wasn't joking around. It claimed all of the Western Hemisphere west of the line previously established between Spain and Portugal. New Spain was even in charge of colonies in the Philippines. This colony became Spain's largest and most important. It was administered for the benefit of the empire and provided more than half of its taxes. At one point, it even supported the administration of all North and Central America. But of course, New Spain had its ugly side too. Colonial law was tailored to protect pure Spanish blood. Administration was based on racial separation, and the people were divided into 4 groups based on race and birthplace. The Spaniards were the most powerful. They were people born in Spain sent to rule the colony. They alone had the legal right to occupy high-level jobs in the government. The criollos, or Creoles, were the Spanish who were born in Mexico. While many were prosperous landowners and merchants, even they had little to say in government. The mestizos, or the mixed ones, were people with both Spanish and native ancestors. They were the low class and were looked down by the Spaniards and the Creoles, who believed that people of full European background were superior to virtually everyone else. But even they had it better than the natives, the pre-Columbian nations that still inhabited New Spain. They were the poorest and most discriminated group who were often forced to work as laborers on the haciendas, ranches and farms. In addition, African slaves were brought in who were considered to be not human beings but property. Meanwhile, English, French and Dutch pirates attacked Spanish ports but were ultimately too small to put any significant dent into the empire's power. Education was, however, encouraged. The first primary school, university and printing press in the Americas were all built in Mexico. And it was in this period that what we now consider as Mexican staples were created, things like tequila, mariachi or the exquisite Mexican cuisine. But by the early 1800s, many Creoles, mestizos and natives really resented the European-born Spaniards. Following the example of the United States, the people believed that Mexico should become independent. When Napoleon invaded Spain in 1808, the Spanish King Charles IV was forced to abdicate and Joseph Bonaparte, Napoleon's brother, was placed on the Spanish throne. This created a crisis of legitimacy of rule, and in New Spain, the upper class began their struggle for power. Viceroy José de Iturrigaray was overthrown in a coup, and in the next 2 years, 3 other viceroys took power. Then, on September 16, 1810, Father Miguel Hidalgo made a call to arms after his plot to rebel was discovered. The Cry of Dolores, as it's called, triggered the Mexican War of Independence. The colonial regime did not expect the size and duration of the insurgency, which spread from Mexico City to the Pacific and Gulf coasts. The war that followed was not a singular event, but a series of struggles and revolts, basically a revolutionary civil war. It lasted for 11 years. In 1821, the Plan of the Three Guarantees, or the Plan of Iguala, was proclaimed. It stated that Mexico was to become a constitutional monarchy whose sole official religion would be Roman Catholicism, in which the Peninsulares and the Creoles of Mexico would enjoy equal political and social rights. The royal government in Mexico collapsed, and the Treaty of Córdoba ended the conflict, and the First Mexican Empire came into existence. The empire was much larger than today's Mexico, encompassing Central America and parts of what is today the Western United States. But although independent, the country went through no revolutionary change, socially or economically. Agustín de Iturbide was the emperor, but didn't have the support of the nobility nor the church. Plus, he had dictatorial tendencies, dissolving the Congress. That prompted Antonio López de Santa Anna, a young colonel, to act against the emperor, proclaim a republic, and force Agustín to abdicate. After less than 2 years of existence, the Empire of Mexico was no longer, and the First Mexican Republic was born. For the first time, the United Mexican States appeared on world maps, this time without the Central American nations. The newly founded republic was plagued by a lot of political instability and economic struggles. Santa Anna would become president in 1832, and in the decades to come he served as president 11 times. He frequently changed his political beliefs and caused insurgencies. In addition to this, the northern states were suffering from frequent attacks of the Comanche Indians. Because of this, states like New Mexico were questioning their loyalty towards the Republic. The Mexican government also awarded extensive land grants in Coahuila y Texas to thousands of Anglo-American families in an effort to populate those regions. But this backfired, and in 1835 Texas declared its independence and fought a war for 7 months, after which it separated from Mexico for good. Then in 1466 the US Congress declared war on Mexico in response to a Mexican massacre of a US Army detachment in disputed territory. Less than 2 years later, Mexico ceded its northern territories to the United States. And eventually, Santa Anna was forced into exile and liberals took control in 1855. Mexico's troubled path wouldn't get any easier anytime soon. In 1857, a new constitution was enacted under President Ignacio Comonfort. It decreased the power of the executive, granted religious freedom, and enfranchised non-property owning men. The constitution was very disliked by the army and the church, and the revolt led to a coup, which led to a full-on war. Liberals ruled from the city of Veracruz and the conservatives from Mexico City. The war lasted for 4 years, ended with a liberal victory, and then France invaded. In 1862, France was seeking to recover some debts, but more importantly, to install a ruler under French control. Archduke Ferdinand Maximilian of Austria was installed as Emperor Maximilian I of Mexico. It was during this invasion that the French suffered a defeat at the Battle of Puebla on May 5, 1862, a date now commemorated as the Cinco de Mayo holiday. Anyway, the Republic still had its president, Benito Juárez, recognized by the United States as the legitimate ruler. France eventually withdrew its troops, and by mid-1867, the Republicans led by Juárez re-seized power, captured the emperor, and executed him. With the Republic restored, Mexico finally had some time to breathe. In 1876, Porfirio Diaz was elected as president. He remained in office until 1911, a period known as the Porfiriato. During this time, the country went through modernization and relative prosperity. While this was a period of stability, Porfirio was considered by many a dictator. Eventually, Diaz was overthrown in 1911. And at this time, the young disillusioned men of rural Mexico outburst their rage against the local elites who benefited from the previous regime. A new conflict began, the decade-long Mexican Revolution. Revolutionaries sought far-reaching social and economic reforms by strengthening the state and weakening the church, rich landowners, and foreign capitalists. During the revolution, the federal army was defeated, the present-day constitution was drafted, and the Institutional Revolutionary Party was created, a party that held power in Mexico from 1929 to 2000. The rest of the 20th century brought a lot more political stability in Mexico. From 1940 to 1970, the country went through a period of prosperity known as the Mexican Miracle. But political unrest grew in the late 1960s, and in 1976 and 1982, the country was hit by economic crises. From 1973 to 2000, almost every year saw an inflation rate higher than 20%, and in 1988 it reached 180%. The situation was stabilized in the 1990s, and in 1994 Mexico became a member of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. From 2006 onward, the government began waging a war on regional drug mafias. Massive raids on drug cartels were and are still carried out, sparking a lot of violence and homicides. Nowadays, Mexico is considered to be a developing country, albeit with the 15th largest economy in the world. If it can maintain political stability and economic growth, it will turn into an emerging power. Drug cartels and insurgent groups, though, are still a big problem, and the possibility of internal conflicts never went away. Still, Mexico is a mega-diverse nation with an incredible cultural and biological heritage, by the way. It has every chance to become a peaceful and prosperous nation. And right now, we're witnessing the makings of Mexico's next chapter. I hope this video was interesting enough to have inspired you to look into it further on your own. If you liked it, leave a like and subscribe. You can leave your comments downstairs, and you can also check out my Patreon page if you want to support me. The link is in the description. I hope to see you next time. Bye.